The ghosts of the family. Vito Corleone had always believed in the importance of family. Family was everything. It was the foundation of his power, the reason he had built the Corleone empire from the ground up. But now, in his old age, the very thing he had worked so hard to protect seemed to be slipping away. The once strong bonds that held the Corleones together were fraying, unraveling, and with each passing day, Vito found himself haunted by the decisions he had made. Decisions that had cost him more than he could ever admit. It started with the house. The Corleone mansion, once full of life and the sounds of family, had grown silent. The hallways echoed with emptiness, and the rooms, once filled with laughter and conversation, now seemed to hold only shadows. Vito could feel it, the weight of something unseen pressing down on him, watching him from the corners of the room. The mansion had become a tomb, and Vito was its prisoner. The first time Vito heard the voices, he was sitting alone in his study, a glass of red wine in his hand. The room was dark, save for the flickering light of the fire, and the silence was heavy. But then, out of the quiet, came a sound, a soft, barely audible whisper. Vito. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. The voice was faint, but unmistakable. It was his wife, Carmela. But that couldn't be. She had passed years ago. Vito stood, his hand trembling slightly as he called out to the empty room. Carmela? The only response was the crackling of the fire. In the days that followed, the voices became more frequent. Sometimes it was Carmela, calling to him from the shadows. Other times, it was Sonny, his eldest son, taken too soon by violence. And then, there was Fredo, his voice always the most haunting, filled with a sorrow that cut deeper than any knife. Papa, why did you let me go? Vito tried to ignore them, to convince himself that it was just his mind playing tricks on him. But the voices were relentless, always there, whispering in the dark, reminding him of the things he had lost, the lives he had taken, and the family he had destroyed. The nights were the worst. Vito would lie in bed, the silence of the mansion pressing down on him, and he would hear them, the footsteps, soft and deliberate, moving through the halls. They would stop outside his door, and for a moment, Vito would hold his breath, waiting for the knock. But it never came, only the whisper of his name, faint and cold. Vito. It was Michael's voice this time, his youngest son, the one who had taken over the family business, the one who had followed in Vito's footsteps. But there was something wrong with the voice. It was twisted, distorted, filled with an anger that Vito had never heard before. You built this, Papa. You built this for us, and now we're all gone. The shadows in the mansion began to take on shapes, familiar shapes. Vito would catch glimpses of them out of the corner of his eye. Carmela, Sonny, Fredo, Michael. They would stand in the darkened corners of the room, watching him, their faces pale and hollow, their eyes filled with accusation. You made us what we are, Vito, Fredo whispered one night, his voice low and filled with sorrow. You built this life for us, and now we're all paying the price. Vito's heart ached with regret, but he couldn't stop the voices, couldn't silence the ghosts that haunted him. They were always there, always watching, always reminding him of the choices he had made. One evening, as Vito sat alone in the garden, the wind rustling the leaves around him, he saw her, Carmela, standing at the edge of the garden, her figure illuminated by the faint light of the moon. She was beautiful, just as he remembered, but there was a sadness in her eyes, a sorrow that Vito couldn't bear to see. "Vito," she whispered, her voice soft and filled with longing. "You did this. You brought this upon us." Vito stood, his heart heavy with guilt and regret. "I did what I had to do. For the family." Carmela shook her head, her figure fading into the shadows. "And now, the family's gone." The voices grew louder, more insistent. The ghosts of his family followed him wherever he went. Through the mansion, through the gardens, through his dreams. They were always there, watching, waiting, reminding him of the price he had paid for power. "Papa," Michael's voice echoed in his mind, cold and distant. "You built this empire, and now you will watch it fall." Vito's nights were filled with nightmares, visions of his family, twisted and broken, their faces pale and hollow, their eyes filled with accusation. He would wake in a cold sweat, his heart pounding in his chest, but the voices would still be there, whispering to him from the shadows. "You can't escape us, Vito." In the end, Vito Corleone, the once powerful head of the Corleone family, realized the terrible truth. He had built his empire on the backs of his family, and now, in his old age, it was his family that haunted him. The ghosts of the people he had loved and lost, the ones he had sacrificed in the name of power, had come to claim him. As the shadows closed in around him, Vito understood that the price of power was not just blood, but the soul of the family itself.